The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of Jefferson Elementary School, casting long streaks of light across the bustling cafeteria. The hum of chatter, laughter, and the occasional clang of a tray hitting a table created a familiar, comforting rhythm for the students. 8-year-old Ethan sat alone at a corner table, carefully unwrapping his modest lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, a small apple, and a juice box his mother had packed for him. He had always been quiet, a shy boy with big brown eyes that seemed to notice everything, even the things others overlooked. As he took a small bite of his sandwich, he glanced outside through the window and froze for a moment. On the edge of the school's front lawn sat a man in tattered clothes, hunched over on a bench, hands gripping a worn cup. His face was weathered and tired, but there was a softness in his eyes that seemed to quietly plead for recognition. Ethan had seen him before, often, actually. The man, whom some children whispered about as the homeless guy, was always there, observing the playground, silently present, but invisible to most. A mix of curiosity and compassion surged through Ethan's chest. He knew he didn't have much, but something inside him urged him to act. He looked at his half-eaten sandwich and then back at the man, who seemed to shrink further into his coat against the morning chill. Ethan's classmates at nearby tables laughed and joked, some casting brief, curious glances at the man outside, but none of them moved. The unspoken social rules of the cafeteria, fear, indifference, a touch of judgment, created a barrier that Ethan, despite his small frame, felt compelled to cross. "Mom always says, help those who need it," he whispered to himself, barely audible over the chatter. His fingers trembled slightly as he broke his sandwich in half. He wrapped the other half carefully in the wax paper and stood up, slipping quietly past the crowded tables. The cafeteria staff glanced at him but, accustomed to the boy's quiet demeanor, didn't question his movements. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and damp grass. Ethan approached the man slowly, unsure if he would speak or turn him away. "Hi. I thought maybe you'd like this," Ethan said softly, holding out the sandwich. The man looked up, startled. His eyes, a deep and tired shade of brown, widened in surprise, and for a brief moment, he seemed frozen, almost unable to believe that someone, a child, no less, was offering kindness without expecting anything in return. He took the sandwich with a hesitant, trembling hand. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raspy but sincere. Ethan smiled shyly, a little embarrassed by the attention. It's okay," he said, before turning to leave. But the man called after him, "Wait, what's your name, kid?" "Ethan," he replied, stopping for a moment. "Yours?" "Thomas," the man answered simply. He took a cautious bite of the sandwich, savoring it as if tasting more than just food, tasting recognition, respect, and human connection. Ethan nodded and walked back toward the school, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun or his morning juice. He didn't tell anyone about the gesture, no one needed to know. The act was its own reward, a secret he carried in his heart. Back in the cafeteria, whispers swirled. A few students had noticed Ethan leave, and a couple of older kids smirked, teasing him quietly about feeding the bum. Ethan ignored them, keeping his head down as he returned to his table. But a strange confidence lingered in his posture, an awareness that he had acted according to what he believed was right, even if the world didn't always see it that way. The man, Thomas, remained on the bench for a few minutes longer, finishing the sandwich and reflecting on the unexpected generosity of a child. He had encountered many people in his life, some kind, many indifferent, some cruel. But this small boy, with no agenda and no expectation of reward, had reminded him of something long forgotten, the simple, profound impact of human kindness. For Thomas, it was a spark of hope in a life that had often felt like a string of disappointments. Later that day, as Ethan walked home along the quiet streets of the suburban town, he thought about his family. His father was at work, exhausted from his second job at the local garage, and his mother was at home, managing bills and grocery lists with quiet determination. Money was tight, life was often stressful, and yet here he was, choosing to give a part of what little he had. The contrast was striking, even to an 8-year-old. In the world, scarcity and abundance existed side by side, and he had made a conscious choice to bridge that gap, even in a tiny way. The day continued, ordinary in appearance, but something subtle had shifted in Ethan. He walked past the park where other children played, past the corner store where Mr. Thompson sometimes lingered, and for the first time, he felt a sense of connection that extended beyond his own life. A ripple had begun, small, almost imperceptible, but real. That evening, at home, Ethan recounted the event to no one, yet replayed it in his mind repeatedly. He thought of Thomas's eyes, the hesitant smile, and the way the man had accepted his small gift with dignity. It wasn't about praise or recognition. It was about doing the right thing, about empathy that transcended fear and judgment. In that moment, Ethan understood, in a way that only children sometimes can, that kindness was both fragile and powerful. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, Thomas Thompson felt an unexpected shift as well. The warmth of a shared sandwich and a small act of care lingered longer than the meal itself. He didn't know it yet, but the boy's gesture would follow him, echoing through years in ways neither could imagine. It was a simple act, a brief encounter, but it carried the seed of something transformative, a connection that would shape lives, choices, and futures. Ethan went to bed that night with a quiet contentment, unaware of the larger story that had just begun. Outside, the suburban streets were calm, the faint glow of street lamps illuminating the quiet rhythm of life. The act of sharing, small and unassuming, had planted the first thread in a tapestry that would one day stretch far beyond that corner of the cafeteria, connecting two lives in ways neither could yet see. The years rolled by, and Jefferson Elementary became a distant memory for Ethan, now a 16-year-old high school student navigating the complexities of teenage life in suburban Illinois. The once shy boy had grown taller, his frame still lean, but his presence carried a quiet thoughtfulness that drew subtle attention from teachers and classmates alike. Ethan's home remained modest, a small, 2-story house with peeling paint in places and a backyard where his younger sister, Lily, often played. His parents worked tirelessly, his father, repairing cars at a local garage, and his mother, juggling part-time jobs while managing the household. Money was tight, yet love and values ran deep in their home, shaping Ethan into the kind, responsible young man he was becoming. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan found himself volunteering at the local shelter for a school-required community service project. The shelter was a large, aging building in the heart of downtown Chicago, a stark contrast to his small suburban town. Its walls, lined with peeling paint and faded posters about resources for those in need, held countless stories of hardship and hope. Inside, children, families, and the homeless moved with quiet determination, and the smell of freshly cooked meals mixed with the faint tang of disinfectant. Ethan moved among the volunteers with a sense of purpose, distributing food, organizing donations, and occasionally lending a kind word to those who seemed invisible to the world outside. As he worked, a sudden memory struck him, a small, vivid flash from years ago. The image of himself, 8 years old, offering half of his lunch to a man named Thomas Thompson, sat squarely in his mind. He had almost forgotten the name, but the face was unmistakable. The man's tired eyes, the hesitant yet grateful smile, the warmth of that fleeting connection, it came rushing back in a wave of nostalgia and curiosity. Ethan paused mid-task, glancing around the shelter, as if half expecting Thomas to appear among the people quietly receiving meals. The memory was more than just nostalgia, it was a reminder of who Ethan was at his core. While many teens his age were caught up in social hierarchies, video games, or weekend parties, Ethan's thoughts were shaped by empathy and reflection. He felt a quiet sense of pride in that long-ago gesture, tempered with the anxiety that he hadn't done enough in his lifetime to make a real difference. It was this tension, between past kindness and present responsibility, that tugged at him, driving his every action that day. Throughout the afternoon, Ethan observed the subtle dynamics of the shelter. Families huddled together in makeshift corners, adults quietly worried about their next meal, and children clung to small toys or blankets for comfort. Some volunteers rushed through tasks mechanically, seeking only to fulfill school or work obligations, while others approached with genuine care. Ethan, as always, found himself drawn to the individuals whose needs went unnoticed, offering extra assistance, listening patiently, or simply sharing a reassuring smile. The echoes of his childhood act of generosity seemed to guide him, reminding him that the smallest gesture could ripple outward in ways unseen. During a break, Ethan sat quietly on a worn wooden bench near the shelter's entrance. Outside, the streets were busy with cars honking, people hurrying, and the distant hum of the city, a contrast to the hushed, almost reverent atmosphere within the shelter. He reflected on the path his life had taken since that fateful day in the elementary school cafeteria. He had grown academically, excelling in math and science, and teachers often praised his discipline and thoughtfulness. Yet socially, he still felt slightly out of place, hesitant to fully connect with peers. The memory of Thomas reminded him that meaningful connections didn't have to follow the rules of popularity or recognition, they could be quiet, profound, and transformative. Ethan's mind wandered further to his parents, who had instilled in him the values of honesty, empathy, and hard work. His father, despite long hours at the garage, always found time to encourage Ethan's education, emphasizing the importance of integrity over shortcuts. His mother, juggling bills and household responsibilities, had modeled resilience and kindness, teaching Ethan that compassion didn't always come with rewards, but it always mattered. These lessons, reinforced by the childhood encounter with Thomas, created a foundation that shaped Ethan's choices and responses to life's challenges. As he resumed his work, Ethan noticed a man standing at the far corner of the shelter, observing quietly. Something about the figure, the posture, the calm authority, the way he seemed to notice everything without intruding, struck a chord in Ethan's memory. He paused, heart quickening slightly, as the man's gaze met his own for a fleeting moment. It was not quite recognition, but there was familiarity, a sense of quiet resonance. Ethan returned to his tasks, though his curiosity lingered like a soft, persistent echo. The day progressed with a rhythm of small victories. Ethan helped an elderly woman carry her bag of groceries, reassured a frightened child with a gentle story, and organized a donation of winter coats for families in need. Each act, though small in isolation, felt significant to him, a reflection of the principle that had guided him since childhood: even minor kindness could have a lasting impact. By the time the shelter began to quiet down in the late afternoon, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered with the familiar awareness that the world was full of challenges beyond his immediate control. Walking home through the leafy suburban streets, Ethan carried a mixture of fatigue, pride, and reflection. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalks, painting the familiar neighborhood in a golden, almost cinematic light. He passed neighbors tending gardens, children riding bicycles, and friends greeting each other with laughter. Though life was ordinary in many ways, Ethan understood that the ordinary moments, simple gestures, small acts of courage, and consistent empathy, were often the most meaningful. That evening, as Ethan sat at the dinner table with his family, he shared stories of the day in broad strokes, careful to respect privacy and dignity. His parents listened, exchanging glances that conveyed pride and understanding. Yet even as the conversation flowed, Ethan's thoughts kept drifting to Thomas, to the memory of a sandwich, a smile, and the profound, invisible connection forged through a single act of generosity. He did not yet know how the memory would shape the next chapter of his life, but he felt its pull, like a quiet current beneath the surface of daily life. Ethan went to bed that night with a mixture of contentment and anticipation. The echoes of his childhood kindness resonated deeply, affirming his belief that compassion was not a fleeting gesture but a lifelong principle. Somewhere in the world, perhaps in the busy streets of Chicago or beyond, the small ripple he had set in motion years ago might still be moving, touching lives in ways he could not yet imagine. And in that quiet moment, as he drifted into sleep, Ethan carried with him the certainty that the simplest acts, a shared sandwich, a listening ear, a gentle word, could leave a legacy far greater than any achievement, grade, or accolade ever could. Ethan's 16th year carried with it a weight that felt heavier than any school assignment or weekend chore. The subtle rhythm of suburban life, which had always brought him comfort, now seemed tinged with anxiety. His father's small auto repair business, once steady, had begun to falter under mounting bills, rising costs, and dwindling customers. Evenings were often filled with hushed conversations in the kitchen, the clink of coins counted one by one, and worried glances exchanged between his parents. Ethan, perceptive and responsible beyond his years, sensed the tension. Every choice he made seemed to carry consequences far larger than his own ambitions. One Thursday afternoon, after school, Ethan lingered at the local coffee shop downtown, a quiet refuge tucked between the bustling streets of Chicago. The aroma of roasted coffee beans mixed with the faint scent of autumn rain on the pavement, creating a contemplative atmosphere. Ethan sipped his hot chocolate slowly, his mind restless, replaying the family's mounting worries. College seemed like a distant dream now, a luxury overshadowed by bills, responsibilities, and the immediate needs of his younger sister, Lily, who adored him with innocent, unwavering faith. As Ethan gazed out the window, he noticed a figure approaching through the light drizzle, tall, poised, and unmistakably familiar. It was Thomas Thompson. But this was not the disheveled man of Ethan's childhood memory. Thomas now carried himself with a quiet authority, his clothes neat and expensive, his presence commanding attention without needing to demand it. Yet, there was a subtle melancholy in his expression, a weight carried despite evident success. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The boy he once was, shy, observant, compassionate, recognized something in this man, a link to the past he had not expected to encounter in the midst of his chaotic present. Thomas paused, glancing at Ethan, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes locked. There was no immediate recognition on Thomas's face, only a quiet curiosity, a sense that he remembered someone, perhaps not fully, but enough to feel a stir of connection. Ethan debated whether to approach, to speak, to risk the awkwardness that often accompanied such encounters. Finally, gathering courage from years of quiet reflection and empathy, he stood and crossed the street, careful to navigate the puddles left by the afternoon rain. "Excuse me, sir," Ethan began, his voice hesitant but steady. "Do I know you?" Thomas studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I don't think we've formally met, but I've seen you around." His tone was kind but measured, the kind that suggested someone used to maintaining boundaries. Ethan's chest tightened. Memories flashed, the cafeteria, the half-shared sandwich, the quiet act of kindness that had defined so much of his moral compass. Could Thomas possibly remember that day? "Yes, maybe you do," Ethan said, taking a deep breath. I gave you half my lunch when I was 8. Recognition flickered in Thomas's eyes, subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile softened his features. "Ethan. I remember," he said quietly. "I remember that moment very clearly." The rain began to fall more steadily, a soft percussion against the window panes of nearby cafes. Ethan and Thomas stepped into the shelter of the coffee shop's awning, continuing their conversation as strangers no longer, yet not quite familiar either. Thomas spoke of his journey after that day, the struggles, the losses, the moments of despair, and Ethan listened, captivated and empathetic. Despite Thomas's success, there was a human fragility that resonated with Ethan. Success had not erased hardship, it had simply reshaped it. Ethan shared his own story cautiously, speaking of his family, the financial struggles at home, and the responsibility he felt weighing on his shoulders. Thomas listened intently, nodding in understanding, his demeanor calm and encouraging. It was in this interaction that Ethan felt the first real stirrings of hope that perhaps the past kindness he had offered was not only remembered but might ripple forward in ways yet unseen. As their conversation drew to a close, Thomas placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. "You've grown into a remarkable young man," he said sincerely. "The compassion you showed all those years ago, it left an impression. One day, I hope you'll see how even the smallest acts can echo far beyond what we imagine." The words struck Ethan with unexpected force. The magnitude of a childhood gesture, something he had considered insignificant, suddenly felt monumental. That evening, walking home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, Ethan felt a strange mixture of awe and anxiety. The encounter had opened a door, one that connected the past to the present and hinted at possibilities he had never dared to imagine. He thought of his parents, of Lily, and of the precariousness of life that had always hovered just beneath the surface of normalcy. This meeting was more than coincidence, it was a crossroads, a juncture where choices, timing, and fate converged. Ethan's mind replayed Thomas's words repeatedly, each repetition adding weight and depth. Compassion, he realized, was not a fleeting act but a principle with enduring power. He understood now that his choices, even the ones he considered small or inconsequential, could shape lives, influence futures, and perhaps, in ways he could not yet grasp, return to him when needed. Most. The following days at school carried a new layer of meaning. Ethan's peers remained largely unaware of the profound encounter, absorbed in their own teenage dramas. Yet for Ethan, the world felt slightly altered, alive with possibility. He began noticing small acts of kindness around him, a classmate helping another with homework, a teacher offering quiet encouragement, a neighbor assisting an elderly resident with groceries. Each observation reinforced the truth he was beginning to understand: empathy was contagious, and small gestures could become transformative ripples. That weekend, Ethan visited his parents, sharing bits of the story cautiously. His father listened with quiet approval, pride evident despite the usual fatigue etched into his face. His mother, ever intuitive, recognized the spark in Ethan's eyes, the sense that he had glimpsed something extraordinary, something that tied his past to a future yet unwritten. Ethan felt supported, yet he knew the real journey was just beginning, that the encounter with Thomas represented more than nostalgia, it was the threshold of a larger, life-changing chapter. As night fell over the suburban streets, lights glowing warmly in the windows of small homes, Ethan lay awake, contemplating the intersection of fate and choice. The memory of sharing his lunch had once been a simple, private act, tucked into the corners of childhood. Now, it had become a living thread, weaving through time and circumstance, connecting him to someone whose life had been quietly altered by a boy's generosity. The realization left him with a quiet resolve: he would meet challenges with the same courage and empathy, striving to honor the connection and the lesson it carried. Ethan's crossroads was no longer just about his family's struggles or his own ambitions. It was about understanding the unseen consequences of actions, the subtle power of human kindness, and the responsibility that came with recognizing that each choice, no matter how small, could influence someone else's life in ways unimaginable. And somewhere, far beyond the walls of his home, Thomas Thompson was carrying the echo of that gesture, unknowingly preparing for a moment when fate would bring them together once more, not just as memories, but as forces shaping each other's lives. The weeks following Ethan's unexpected meeting with Thomas Thompson were a swirl of emotions he had never anticipated. High school, once a familiar landscape of classrooms, lockers, and friends, now felt tinged with new complexity. Every glance at the bustling hallways reminded him that life was larger than his immediate world, that each choice carried weight far beyond what he had imagined. And always, in the quiet corners of his mind, lingered the shadow of Thomas, the man who had once been homeless, now poised, successful, yet subtly burdened by a past few could comprehend. Ethan returned to his routine, attending classes, helping his younger sister with homework, and assisting his parents in the daily rhythm of their modest household. Yet his perspective had shifted. He noticed the small, overlooked struggles of others, a friend whose parents argued incessantly, a classmate working after school to support a sibling, a janitor quietly cleaning the hallways while students passed obliviously. Each observation reminded him of Thomas's story, of the fragile balance between hardship and resilience, and of the profound ways in which a single act of kindness could echo across time. One afternoon, as autumn winds swept through the suburban streets, Ethan received a text from Thomas, an invitation to meet at a downtown art exhibit showcasing local talent. Ethan hesitated, unsure of what to expect. There was curiosity, certainly, but also a twinge of anxiety. The man before him in the coffee shop had been polite and kind, but now an invitation to a personal space, a glimpse into Thomas's world, hinted at something far more significant. The exhibit was held in a refurbished warehouse, its industrial walls softened by vibrant paintings and warm lighting. People milled about, sipping wine or coffee, discussing brushstrokes and techniques with animated enthusiasm. Thomas stood near a large abstract painting, calm yet observant, a figure of quiet confidence. In a crowd that buzzed with chatter. When Ethan approached, Thomas's face lit with a subtle recognition, a small but genuine smile. "You came," Thomas said simply. "I'm glad." Ethan nodded, swallowing a mix of nerves and excitement. I wasn't sure what to expect," he admitted, glancing at the vibrant artwork that seemed to pulse with energy. Thomas chuckled softly. "Neither was I. But sometimes, it's not about expectations, it's about noticing what's possible." His eyes, still carrying traces of the hardships he had endured, held a depth that made Ethan both anxious and inspired. It was clear that success had not erased pain, it had merely refined it, shaping Thomas into someone who understood generosity not as a luxury, but as a responsibility. As they walked through the exhibit, Thomas shared glimpses of his journey, the years after the shared sandwich, the struggles to rebuild his life, the moments when hope seemed elusive. He spoke candidly about loss, mistakes, and the lonely weight of achievement without companionship. Ethan listened, captivated, noticing the contrast between Thomas's external composure and the internal vulnerability he revealed only in these moments of trust. The man's life, full of wealth and opportunity, was intertwined with shadows of past despair, illustrating that material success could never fully erase the scars of hardship. Ethan shared parts of his own life, careful to convey honesty without vulnerability that might feel exposed. He spoke of his parents' struggles, the daily pressures of high school, and the quiet moments where he felt powerless in the face of larger problems. Thomas nodded thoughtfully, offering words of guidance and encouragement that were gentle yet firm. "You have a gift, Ethan," he said. "Not wealth, not accolades, a gift of empathy. And that gift can shape lives in ways you might never anticipate." The conversation shifted to future possibilities. Thomas hinted at opportunities that could open doors for Ethan, mentoring, community projects, even scholarships, but he emphasized that any path would require courage, integrity, and commitment. Ethan felt a stirring of hope, yet also apprehension. The gap between his current life and the possibilities being outlined seemed vast, almost unattainable. And yet, the seed planted years ago, nurtured by the smallest act of kindness, now appeared poised to grow into something extraordinary. Outside the exhibit, the city's lights shimmered against wet streets, reflecting neon signs and the glow of traffic in puddles. Ethan and Thomas walked together, the conversation continuing, yet unspoken questions hung between them. How far should one trust the unexpected? How much could a single encounter truly alter the trajectory of life? Ethan's mind raced, recalling every choice, every subtle act of moral courage that had guided him until now. He realized that life was not simply a series of isolated events but a network of interwoven moments, each capable of amplifying or diminishing the others. Back at home, Ethan reflected on the meeting late into the night. Lily's soft breathing in the next room, his parents' quiet conversations downstairs, and the faint hum of city life outside created a cocoon of normalcy that contrasted sharply with the extraordinary possibilities now laid before him. He realized that Thomas's presence, though unfamiliar and new, had cast a shadow over his world, not one of fear or intimidation, but of challenge, of opportunity, of moral and emotional growth. The shadow was a reminder that life was complex, that generosity carried weight, and that the bonds formed through empathy could shape destinies. The following week at school, Ethan noticed subtle changes in himself. He approached situations differently, guided by a deeper awareness of consequence and responsibility. When a younger student was bullied in the hallway, Ethan intervened, gently but firmly, standing up for what was right. When a teacher struggled with administrative challenges, he offered assistance without expectation of reward. These moments, small in isolation, were reflections of the lessons embedded in his encounter with Thomas, the understanding that moral courage and empathy, though quiet, were transformative forces. Meanwhile, Thomas continued to observe Ethan from a distance, offering subtle guidance and mentorship, never imposing, always encouraging. The dynamic between them began to crystallize into something powerful yet understated, a mentor-mentee relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and the quiet understanding that kindness, once given, could return in unexpected ways. Ethan felt the weight of this connection, aware that his childhood act, the simple sharing of a sandwich, had not only been remembered but had created a bridge, a pathway toward growth, opportunity, and emotional depth that neither of them could have foreseen at the time. One rainy afternoon, Ethan sat by his bedroom window, watching droplets race down the glass. He thought of Thomas's words, the shadow of the man now intertwined with his own life, and the realization that kindness was both a moral compass and a source of unexpected opportunity. Life, he understood, was not simply a sequence of events but a delicate balance of choices, connections, and the courage to act in alignment with one's values. That shadow, the figure of Thomas Thompson, had become a guiding presence, a reminder that the past could illuminate the present and shape the future in ways far beyond ordinary comprehension. And somewhere in the city, Thomas too felt the subtle pull of destiny. The boy who had shared a sandwich years ago had grown into a young man of principle, someone who mirrored the very values Thomas himself held dear. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible moment of recognition, a convergence of past and present that hinted at the transformative potential yet to unfold. The first hints of winter painted the suburban streets in pale frost, and Ethan found himself drawn more frequently into the rhythm of Thomas Thompson's world. Their interactions, once brief and tentative, had evolved into something deeper, a mentor-mentee bond that neither had anticipated. Thomas, despite the veneer of success and composure, had begun to reveal glimpses of vulnerability, moments when his past struggles slipped through the cracks of his carefully constructed life. For Ethan, these glimpses were both humbling and inspiring. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that success did not erase human fragility, but could coexist with compassion, integrity, and the quiet power of connection. Their meetings were often set in the neutral spaces of the city, cozy coffee shops, quiet corners of public libraries, or community centers hosting volunteer programs. Each setting reinforced the duality of their worlds, Ethan's modest upbringing intertwined with Thomas's polished professional life, forming a bridge between two realities that had once seemed impossibly distant. In these spaces, Ethan began to glimpse the broader impact of empathy, watching Thomas interact with the community with a rare blend of authority, humility, and generosity. Ethan's role in these interactions was subtle but significant. He assisted in organizing charity drives, helping to sort donations of clothing and food, and occasionally volunteering in mentorship programs for younger children. The activities themselves were valuable, but the emotional stakes were far deeper. Through these shared experiences, Ethan witnessed the tangible outcomes of kindness, the way careful attention, thoughtful planning, and genuine care could transform lives in practical and meaningful ways. For Thomas, seeing Ethan's quiet determination and moral clarity reaffirmed a belief long held but sometimes forgotten, that one act of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to inspire and perpetuate further acts of good. One afternoon, they attended a community fundraising event at a local school auditorium. The event was bustling with energy, parents, teachers, students, and neighbors all working together to raise support for families in need. Bright banners hung from the walls, and the buzz of conversation mingled with the strains of a school choir performing on stage. Thomas navigated the crowd with ease, offering words of encouragement, shaking hands, and listening intently to the stories shared with him. Ethan, observing quietly at first, gradually stepped forward to assist, introducing himself to volunteers, helping coordinate tables, and ensuring that everyone felt acknowledged. The moment was cinematic in its simplicity, a harmony of small actions combining to produce meaningful impact. Amid the controlled chaos, Ethan noticed the subtle contrast between the abundance of the volunteers and the scarcity faced by those they were helping. Families waiting for assistance, children clutching small stuffed animals, and elderly residents quietly Expressing gratitude highlighted the stark reality that generosity was not only about giving but about understanding. Ethan felt a quiet sense of responsibility, a call to embody the values Thomas had shown him, and to carry forward the lessons instilled by a single, transformative childhood gesture. During a quiet break in the event, Thomas and Ethan stepped outside, the cold winter air crisp against their faces. Thomas regarded Ethan with a mixture of pride and reflection. "You're learning quickly," he said softly. "It's not just about the tasks we complete. It's about how we see people, how we respond to their needs, and how we carry those lessons into every interaction." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the words, understanding that the bridge between their worlds was not merely practical but profoundly moral. The afternoons spent together became a rhythm of learning, trust, and emotional growth. Thomas shared stories from his past, tales of hardship, mistakes, and resilience, while Ethan contributed insights from his own life, moments of quiet courage, acts of honesty, and the moral dilemmas faced daily in school and at home. The exchange created a tapestry of shared experience, where lessons flowed both ways. Thomas, who had once been a lone figure navigating a harsh world, began to rediscover purpose through Ethan's empathy and integrity. And Ethan, in turn, gained confidence, understanding, and a model of how to navigate life's complexities with moral clarity. The bridge of connection was not without its challenges. Ethan occasionally struggled to reconcile the privilege he glimpsed in Thomas's life with the ongoing struggles of his own family. Feelings of inadequacy or envy surfaced, yet they were tempered by understanding, gratitude, and a growing awareness of interdependence. Thomas addressed these moments with patience, emphasizing that wealth and opportunity were not ends in themselves, but tools to create positive change and meaningful connections. Ethan began to grasp that empathy required courage, consistency, and humility, and that those qualities could flourish even in modest circumstances. One particularly memorable afternoon, they visited a local shelter for a holiday volunteer initiative. Children scurried about, decorating trees with handmade ornaments while volunteers distributed warm meals and gifts. Ethan watched as Thomas knelt to speak with a young girl, listening attentively as she recounted her struggles, dreams, and fears. The sight moved Ethan deeply, a reminder that the human connection they fostered was more than symbolic. It was real, immediate, and transformative. Thomas's gestures, paired with Ethan's growing confidence, created an environment where hope and dignity could coexist even amid hardship. Beyond the practical work, the bridge of connection extended into personal growth. Ethan began to develop skills he had never considered: public speaking, leadership, and strategic thinking, all rooted in the moral compass he had carried since childhood. Thomas's mentorship emphasized that success was not merely measured in accomplishments but in the ability to influence lives positively, to act with integrity, and to create lasting, meaningful impact. For Ethan, these lessons crystallized the idea that his choices, guided by empathy and courage, could ripple outward, shaping the world in ways he had only begun to imagine. Evenings at home were often filled with reflection. Ethan would recount the day's experiences to his parents or write quietly in his journal, processing the lessons and emotions stirred by his growing involvement with Thomas. He observed subtle changes in himself, greater patience with peers, increased awareness of systemic challenges, and a heightened sensitivity to the needs of others. These internal shifts were mirrored externally in his interactions, gestures of kindness, thoughtful assistance, and leadership that others began to notice. It was as if the bridge Thomas had helped him build was extending in multiple directions, touching lives beyond the immediate scope of their work. As winter deepened, Ethan realized that the mentorship and shared experiences with Thomas had created more than guidance; they had forged trust, loyalty, and a profound understanding of human interconnectedness. The bridge between their worlds was now sturdy, carrying not only shared tasks and lessons but emotional resonance, moral clarity, and a vision of how one life could profoundly influence another. For Ethan, the bridge symbolized the power of empathy, the enduring impact of kindness, and the quiet, transformative force of connection, a force set in motion years ago by a simple act of generosity, now blossoming into a bond that would shape their lives in ways neither could yet fully comprehend. Winter had settled fully over the suburban streets, painting the world in shades of gray and white. Ethan's life, which had begun to feel more stable with Thomas Thompson's mentorship and guidance, now faced new and unexpected challenges. His father's small auto repair business, once merely struggling, teetered dangerously close to closure. A string of unexpected expenses, car part shortages, increasing rent for the garage, and the persistent challenge of attracting customers in a saturated market, left the family stretched thin. His mother, ever resilient, quietly juggled additional shifts at the local grocery store, managing household expenses with meticulous care. Despite their combined effort, the looming threat of eviction and mounting bills cast a shadow over their home. Ethan carried the weight of these worries on his young shoulders. While his peers focused on weekend plans, social media, or upcoming dances, Ethan was preoccupied with late-night calculations of bills, potential tutoring jobs, and ways to contribute to his family's income. Yet, unlike some teens, his anxiety did not make him bitter or withdrawn. Instead, it fueled a determination to do what was right, to protect those he loved, and to maintain the values instilled by his parents and reinforced by Thomas. It was a quiet strength, one that often went unnoticed, but it shaped every decision he made. Meanwhile, Thomas faced his own storm. The philanthropic projects he had worked tirelessly to build were threatened by a corporate antagonist, a former business partner seeking to undermine the charitable initiatives Thomas had established. Legal disputes, media scrutiny, and the ever-present risk of public misunderstanding combined to create tension that Thomas rarely displayed outwardly. To the world, he remained composed, successful, and respected. But in private, the stress gnawed at him, reminding him that generosity, no matter how genuine, was vulnerable to manipulation and betrayal. One chilly afternoon, Ethan visited Thomas's office, a sleek modern space overlooking the bustling city streets. The contrast between the polished environment and Ethan's modest home could not have been starker, yet it was not intimidating. Thomas had always maintained an open, encouraging presence. As Ethan entered, he noticed Thomas pacing, a rare display of unease crossing his features. The corporate legal battle had escalated, letters, emails, and phone calls demanded immediate attention. The mentor-mentee relationship, while built on trust and guidance, now carried the weight of shared anxiety. Thomas sighed and motioned for Ethan to sit. "These challenges," he began carefully, "they remind me that even the best intentions can be tested. People sometimes act out of fear, greed, or misunderstanding. It's a part of life we can't always control." Ethan listened attentively, sensing both the gravity of the situation and the lesson embedded within it. Thomas continued, emphasizing that resilience, integrity, and careful judgment were the keys to navigating crises. Ethan felt the tension but also a profound sense of responsibility, not only to himself and his family but to the broader moral framework Thomas was helping him understand. As the days passed, Ethan faced moral and emotional dilemmas in his personal life as well. A friend at school approached him with an opportunity to cheat on an important exam, a path that promised immediate relief from academic pressure but violated every principle Ethan held dear. The decision weighed heavily on him, echoing the real-life challenges Thomas faced in the corporate sphere. Ethan realized that storms, whether personal or external, were tests of character. He chose integrity, refusing the shortcut, understanding that the ripple effects of his decisions extended beyond immediate convenience. At home, tensions rose. The family budget grew tighter, and small arguments became more frequent. Ethan's younger sister, Lily, noticed her brother's worry and tried, in her innocent way, to lighten the mood with stories and drawings. Their bond, strong and unspoken, became a source of emotional sustenance for Ethan. His parents, though worried, admired his resilience and determination, even if they could not fully articulate it. Within the domestic sphere, Ethan was learning the difficult lessons of empathy, responsibility, and courage, the kind of lessons that could only be absorbed through lived experience. Meanwhile, Thomas continued to act as a stabilizing influence. Despite his own battles, he encouraged Ethan to see beyond immediate difficulties, to recognize patterns, and to maintain faith in the power of small, consistent acts of kindness. He shared stories from his own life, recounting times when challenges seemed insurmountable but perseverance, ethics, and a commitment to moral action carried him through. These stories were not abstract lessons but lived experiences, providing Ethan with tangible examples of resilience and courage in the face of adversity. One particularly tense afternoon, news arrived that the family's landlord had issued a warning notice due to unpaid rent. Ethan, feeling a mixture of fear and determination, began researching possible solutions, community assistance programs, school-based aid, and even small part-time jobs that could help bridge the financial gap. His mind, sharp and resourceful, quickly formulated potential plans, but the emotional weight of responsibility was heavy. He understood, at 16, that failure could have consequences beyond himself, for his sister, for his parents, and for the delicate sense of stability they all relied upon. Simultaneously, Thomas confronted the looming threat to his philanthropic initiatives. Meetings, legal consultations, and media appearances consumed his days, yet he remained composed in front of Ethan, demonstrating that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. He encouraged Ethan to maintain focus on his own responsibilities, reinforcing the idea that storms, while inevitable, could be navigated with principle, preparation, and perseverance. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan sat by his bedroom window, gazing at the city lights flickering in the distance. He reflected on the parallels between his own life and Thomas's, both facing pressures from forces beyond immediate control, both navigating challenges that tested integrity, patience, and resilience. Yet in both cases, the bonds of trust, empathy, and moral courage provided a framework for action, a reminder that storms, no matter how fierce, could be weathered with clarity and conviction. Ethan's experiences during this period became a crucible for growth. He learned that responsibility often arrived uninvited, that courage was tested in small, daily decisions, and that the presence of a guiding influence, someone who combined compassion with experience, could transform fear into action. Thomas's mentorship, grounded in real-world lessons and personal vulnerability, offered a roadmap not only for survival but for thriving under pressure. As winter deepened, the storm clouds over Ethan's life did not dissipate, but he began to understand their purpose. They were tests of character, mirrors reflecting the values he had internalized, and opportunities to act with integrity, courage, and compassion. And somewhere beyond the familiar walls of his home, Thomas too was navigating his own storm, inspired by the very boy whose small act of kindness years ago had set the stage for a connection that now provided strength, guidance, and the promise of shared triumph over adversity. Spring arrived slowly, melting the remnants of winter frost and bringing a renewed sense of possibility to Ethan's world. The suburban streets, lined with budding trees and colorful flower beds, mirrored the subtle shift in his own life, a transition from uncertainty toward opportunity. Yet the challenges that had defined his winter months did not disappear. His family's financial struggles persisted, and Thomas Thompson's philanthropic and professional challenges remained pressing. Despite these ongoing pressures, a series of pivotal moments began to shape the trajectory of Ethan's life, moments that would ultimately serve as the turning points in his journey. It began with a scholarship opportunity announced at Jefferson High School. A local foundation, impressed by students demonstrating not only academic excellence but also leadership and community service, offered a substantial award. Ethan, whose grades were solid but not extraordinary, initially hesitated to apply. Self-doubt crept in, reminding him of the limitations of his modest background and the formidable obstacles his family faced. Yet, Thomas's words from months prior resonated in his mind. Even the smallest gestures, when combined with effort and integrity, can ripple far beyond what we imagine. With cautious optimism, Ethan prepared his application, carefully documenting his volunteer work at the shelter, his mentorship experiences, and the small acts of kindness he had carried out since childhood. Simultaneously, Ethan's relationship with Thomas deepened in unexpected ways. Their weekly meetings, once centered primarily around guidance and community work, began to explore broader life lessons, financial literacy, ethical decision-making, and the long-term impact of choices. Thomas shared stories of his early career, moments when he had risked comfort to pursue integrity, instances when small ethical decisions had led to profound consequences, both positive and negative. Ethan absorbed these stories, recognizing parallels to his own challenges at home, in school, and in his interactions with peers. The mentorship became more than guidance, it became a blueprint for navigating life with empathy, courage, and resilience. One particularly influential afternoon, Thomas invited Ethan to a corporate charity gala he was organizing. The event, held in a grand hotel ballroom, was a dazzling display of generosity, networking, and civic engagement. Ethan had never attended such an affair, and the experience was overwhelming yet illuminating. He watched as Thomas moved gracefully among donors and guests, demonstrating not only confidence but an unwavering moral center. Ethan observed how genuine kindness and strategic thinking could coexist, creating meaningful impact that extended far beyond the superficial trappings of wealth and influence. Amid the elegance of the gala, a chance encounter underscored the interconnectedness of past and present. A young child, no older than Ethan had been when he shared his lunch with Thomas, approached with a shy smile and a handmade card for the foundation. Ethan was struck by the parallel. Just as he had influenced Thomas years ago through a simple gesture, small actions now inspired kindness in others. The moment crystallized a profound truth: generosity, empathy, and courage were not bound by age, wealth, or circumstance, they were transferable, enduring, and capable of creating a chain reaction of goodwill. Back in his own life, the turning points were more personal and immediate. Ethan's younger sister, Lily, had begun to excel in school, her confidence bolstered by the stability and encouragement he provided. Ethan's parents, while still navigating financial uncertainty, noticed subtle changes in their son, a maturity, a calm decisiveness, and a moral clarity that often belied his 16 years. These developments, though quiet, reflected the transformative power of mentorship, moral courage, and consistent effort. Ethan's scholarship application eventually led to an unexpected breakthrough. The Foundation's board, moved by his narrative of long-term community engagement, integrity, and personal responsibility, awarded him the scholarship. The announcement marked a significant turning point, not only alleviating some financial pressure but affirming the principles Ethan had lived by. The recognition reinforced the lesson Thomas had imparted countless times: steadfast adherence to one's values, even in small, unassuming acts, could produce tangible, meaningful change. Yet turning points often come with emotional complexity. Ethan felt a blend of pride, relief, and lingering anxiety. The scholarship represented opportunity, but also responsibility. He was aware that success carried expectations, for academic performance, ethical behavior, and ongoing community engagement. At the same time, he recognized the importance of humility, gratitude, and continued effort. It was a moment of growth, the realization that turning points were not merely events but processes requiring reflection, preparation, and moral clarity. Amid these transformative experiences, Ethan encountered a moral challenge that tested the depth of his character. A close friend confided in him about plans to manipulate the school's grading system, offering a shortcut to better academic outcomes. The proposal tempted some students, promising immediate gratification and social advantage. Ethan's response, shaped by years of mentorship and the example set by Thomas, was measured yet firm. He declined the scheme, emphasizing the importance of integrity and the long-term consequences of ethical compromise. The moment, while difficult socially, reaffirmed his growing understanding that turning points were not only external achievements but internal victories, moments where character was forged under pressure. In parallel, Thomas faced his own crucial turning point. The legal and corporate challenges threatening his charitable initiatives reached a resolution through a combination of strategic negotiation and principled persistence. Watching Thomas navigate these high-stakes situations provided Ethan with a live example of resilience, patience, and moral courage in action. It became evident that turning points often involved risk, discomfort, and uncertainty, yet offered profound opportunity for growth, leadership, and influence. By the end of the spring semester, the cumulative effect of these experiences was undeniable. Ethan had matured, his worldview expanded by exposure to complexity, moral challenges, and mentorship. The intersection of personal effort, guidance from Thomas, and the ethical framework instilled by his parents created a foundation for meaningful decision-making. Turning points, he realized, were not singular events but interconnected sequences of choices, challenges, and moral reckonings, each shaping the trajectory of one's life. As the first warm days of spring settled over the suburban streets, Ethan felt a quiet sense of anticipation. The lessons of the past, the mentorship of Thomas, and the tangible rewards of his efforts combined to create a sense of direction, purpose, and moral certainty. Life's storms were not over, but the turning points he had encountered offered clarity, confidence, and a renewed understanding of the impact of empathy, courage, and integrity. And somewhere in the city, Thomas Thompson observed the young man he had once met as a child, witnessing the ripple effect of a small act of kindness that had grown into a force capable of shaping lives, communities, and futures. Summer arrived slowly, washing the suburban streets with golden sunlight and the scent of blooming flowers. Yet for Ethan, life's external warmth did little to ease the lingering shadows cast by his family's struggles and the pressures of high school. While the scholarship and mentorship with Thomas Thompson had opened doors, the weight of responsibility remained ever present. Bills still demanded attention, his parents still carried fatigue from long hours, and the uncertainties of the future continued to hover like clouds on the horizon. Life, Ethan realized, was a delicate interplay of shadows and light, moments of triumph illuminated by persistent challenges. One afternoon, Thomas invited Ethan to tour a community center funded by his charitable initiatives. The center was a vibrant space, brightly painted walls adorned with murals, classrooms filled with books and computers, and a bustling gym where children played and learned. For Ethan, the visit was a revelation. The contrast between the lively, well-resourced center and his own modest experiences growing up highlighted both the disparities and possibilities in the world around him. He witnessed firsthand the impact of Thomas's vision, lives transformed not merely by financial support, but by careful attention, empathy, and the cultivation of opportunity. As they walked through the center, Thomas spoke candidly about the challenges behind the scenes. Staff shortages, bureaucratic hurdles, and occasional conflicts with local authorities made running the center a constant balancing act. Yet through it all, Thomas's dedication never wavered. Ethan began to understand that true leadership required embracing both the burdens and the responsibilities, navigating difficulties with patience, strategy, and unwavering integrity. He recognized that light could not exist without shadow, progress required effort, resilience, and moral courage in the face of adversity. During the visit, Ethan encountered a young boy named Marcus, no older than 10, who reminded him of his own childhood vulnerability. Marcus had been hesitant to engage with the activities at the center, carrying a visible weight of insecurity and fear. Ethan approached cautiously, offering encouragement and listening patiently as Marcus shared his struggles with school, friends, and family. Over the next hour, through gentle conversation and small acts of guidance, Ethan helped Marcus gain confidence, participate in games, and even contribute to a group project. The experience left Ethan with a profound sense of responsibility, the realization that small gestures, patience, and attention could illuminate someone's path, even amidst their personal shadows. Later that evening, Ethan returned home, reflecting on the day's lessons. The memory of Marcus lingered, intertwining with recollections of Thomas and the earlier moments that had defined his own moral growth. He understood now that shadows, financial hardship, societal inequities, personal fears, were inevitable. Yet the light, manifested in kindness, mentorship, and ethical choices, could pierce those shadows, offering hope and tangible transformation. It was a delicate balance, one that required continuous awareness, effort, and courage. Meanwhile, at Thomas's office, the ongoing pressures of corporate disputes and philanthropic management remained. Despite external success, Thomas confronted moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion. Yet the sight of Ethan, a young man guided by empathy, integrity, and a moral compass strengthened by mentorship, provided reassurance. He saw the ripple effect of his earlier experiences with Ethan, witnessing firsthand how guidance, trust, and encouragement could cultivate resilience, courage, and purpose in another life. In that reflection, Thomas found a renewed commitment to his work, a reminder that even amidst shadows, light could be fostered and shared. One pivotal moment occurred when Ethan received news that Marcus had shared his newfound confidence with his parents, expressing excitement for school and social activities. The boy's transformation, though small in scale, symbolized the larger principle Ethan had internalized, that empathy, consistent attention, and moral courage could generate meaningful change. It reinforced Ethan's belief in the enduring power of connection, mentorship, and the moral lessons embedded in even the smallest gestures. At home, the interplay of shadows and light continued. Evening conversations with his parents revolved around practical challenges, but also moments of gratitude and reflection. Ethan observed his mother's quiet determination and his father's subtle resilience, recognizing the strength that existed within his family despite external pressures. These observations, combined with lessons from Thomas and experiences with the community center, created a layered understanding of life's dualities: hardship and joy, struggle and triumph, darkness and illumination. The summer weeks also allowed Ethan time to strengthen his own sense of purpose. He began taking the initiative in planning community service projects at school, organizing small events to support local families in need. These efforts, while modest, mirrored the principles Thomas had imparted: empathy, integrity, and proactive engagement with the world. Each successful project, every moment when a peer or younger student felt uplifted, reinforced the interplay of shadows and light, demonstrating that positive action could illuminate even the most challenging circumstances. As July deepened and evenings grew longer, Ethan stood on the threshold of adolescence and young adulthood, contemplating the lessons of the past months. The shadows he faced, family struggles, academic pressures, and social challenges, remained real and significant. Yet the light, mentorship, moral courage, and the ability to positively impact others, offered a roadmap for navigating life with resilience, compassion, and hope. He understood that life would always carry both shadow and illumination, but the choice of how to respond, how to act, and how to nurture light amidst darkness rested firmly within him. Ethan's reflection on these experiences crystallized one enduring truth: while challenges, hardships, and uncertainty would always exist, they were not the defining forces of life. Rather, it was the deliberate cultivation of empathy, moral clarity, and courage, the conscious effort to foster light, that shaped character, created opportunity, and transformed both individual lives and communities. In this balance of shadows and light, Ethan found his purpose, strengthened by Thomas's guidance and inspired by the tangible changes he witnessed in others. Autumn had arrived with a crispness in the air, the trees turning brilliant shades of amber, gold, and crimson. For Ethan, life seemed to be in constant motion. The scholarship, community projects, and mentorship with Thomas Thompson had become integral parts of his daily existence. Yet amidst these accomplishments, the most profound lessons were emerging not from achievement, but from human connection. One afternoon, a seemingly ordinary encounter would illuminate the power of unexpected bonds, reshaping Ethan's understanding of compassion, empathy, and responsibility. It began at the local library, a quiet sanctuary of knowledge tucked between bustling city streets. Ethan had been assisting younger students with reading assignments as part of a volunteer initiative Thomas had encouraged him to participate in. The library was a place of focus and calm, where the aroma of books mixed with the subtle hum of computers and soft whispers of children learning. While Ethan guided one student through a particularly challenging passage, a boy named Liam lingered nearby, clutching a worn notebook and observing quietly. There was something tentative, almost fragile, in Liam's demeanor that drew Ethan's attention. "Hey," Ethan said gently, kneeling to meet Liam at eye level. "Do you want some help with your work?" The boy hesitated, then nodded, revealing a nervous smile. As they worked together, Ethan learned that Liam was struggling not only academically but socially, teased by peers, facing instability at home, and often feeling invisible in the midst of larger challenges. Ethan's empathy, honed through his own experiences of hardship and guided by Thomas's mentorship, allowed him to connect with Liam in a way few others could. Over the following weeks, Ethan continued to spend time with Liam, offering guidance, encouragement, and small moments of kindness, celebrating successes, gently correcting mistakes, and instilling confidence. The boy's transformation was subtle but undeniable. He began to smile more, participate in group activities, and even assist other students in reading sessions. For Ethan, this was a revelation, the realization that human connection, fostered through patience and understanding, could catalyze profound change in another's life. The bond between Ethan and Liam extended beyond academics. On weekends, Ethan would invite Liam to join him in community projects, helping organize food drives, cleanup initiatives, or charity events. Liam, initially hesitant and withdrawn, gradually became an active participant, gaining confidence and purpose. Their interactions were not one-sided. Ethan too was transformed. Guiding Liam reinforced lessons about resilience, empathy, and the enduring impact of kindness, principles he had absorbed through his own experiences with Thomas. Meanwhile, Thomas observed the evolving relationship with quiet pride. He recognized in Ethan the same qualities that had inspired him years ago: moral courage, empathy, and the ability to translate principle into action. Watching Ethan nurture Liam's growth reminded Thomas of the interconnectedness of human experience, the way small acts of kindness, trust, and mentorship ripple outward, creating bonds that transcend circumstance, age, and background. It was a living testament to the philosophy that had guided both of them, that generosity and empathy, once sown, continue to grow in unexpected ways. One particularly poignant moment occurred during a community service event at a local shelter. Liam had initially been hesitant to participate, unsure of his abilities and fearful of social interactions. Ethan, drawing upon his own experiences of vulnerability, encouraged him gently but firmly. By the end of the day, Liam was interacting confidently with children and volunteers alike, demonstrating initiative and care. The transformation was visible not only to Ethan but to the volunteers, many of whom praised the boy's newfound confidence. In that moment, Ethan understood the full weight of mentorship, that the cultivation of character and confidence in another human being could produce ripples far beyond immediate observation. Beyond structured activities, the bond between Ethan and Liam extended into the subtle moments of life, shared stories, laughter, and the quiet comfort of someone who truly sees and values you. Ethan's patience and attention provided Liam with stability, trust, and a sense of belonging, while Liam's growth offered Ethan affirmation of his own capabilities, empathy, and the enduring value of human connection. These moments were powerful because they were unplanned, organic, and genuine, a reminder that life's most meaningful bonds often emerge in the spaces between formal instruction, structured mentorship, and societal expectation. Simultaneously, Ethan's family observed the changes. Lily noticed her brother's increasing confidence and emotional maturity, while their parents marveled at his ability to guide, support, and nurture another child despite his own challenges. It was clear that Ethan was learning to translate the values he had internalized, integrity, compassion, courage, into actionable, transformative behavior. These bonds, forged through intentionality and empathy, reflected a deeper understanding, that life's challenges were opportunities not only for personal growth but for creating positive impact in the lives of others. By the time Thanksgiving approached, the bond between Ethan and Liam had become a cornerstone of both their lives. Liam's academic improvement, social confidence, and emotional stability were tangible reflections of the time, patience, and care Ethan had invested. Conversely, Ethan's own growth, strengthened moral compass, leadership abilities, and understanding of human resilience, was reinforced and validated through this relationship. The encounter had begun unexpectedly, yet it revealed the profound potential inherent in everyday moments, demonstrating that kindness and guidance could bridge gaps, heal wounds, and foster hope. Ethan reflected on these developments with gratitude, recognizing that the unexpected bonds in life, whether with mentors, peers, or those in need of guidance, could shape character, influence outcomes, and illuminate paths previously unseen. The lessons embedded in these relationships were timeless. Empathy could overcome fear, generosity could cultivate trust, and small acts of attention could ripple outward, creating meaningful, enduring connections that redefine lives. Winter had returned, bringing a sharp chill to the suburban streets and a reflective heaviness to Ethan's world. Life, once flowing in a rhythm of mentorship, volunteer work, and school activities, now pressed upon him with the undeniable weight of consequence. The lessons he had learned over the past years, empathy, resilience, moral courage, were tested as never before. Each decision seemed monumental, each choice a potential pivot in the trajectory of not only his life but the lives of those around him. It began with a personal dilemma. A neighbor, struggling after losing her job, approached Ethan with a request for financial help. The family's own budget was stretched thin, every dollar accounted for, yet the neighbor's need was immediate and pressing. Ethan wrestled with conflicting impulses, the desire to help, the awareness of limited resources, and the lessons imparted by Thomas about balancing generosity with prudence. After careful consideration, he found a middle ground, organizing a small community drive to gather necessities for the neighbor rather than providing direct financial aid. The solution honored his values, demonstrating that moral responsibility was not always about sacrifice alone, but about creativity, empathy, and action grounded in wisdom. Simultaneously, school pressures escalated. Ethan's scholarship demanded not only academic excellence but leadership in extracurricular activities, mentoring responsibilities, and public engagement. A particularly competitive academic project required him to collaborate with peers whose priorities and work ethics clashed sharply with his own. The situation tested his patience, negotiation skills, and ability to maintain integrity under pressure. He found himself mediating conflicts, encouraging collaboration, and advocating for fairness, learning firsthand that ethical choices often demanded courage, persistence, and a willingness to stand firm even when unpopular. At home, family tensions mirrored the pressures at school. His parents, though supportive, were growing increasingly anxious about financial instability. The stress was palpable in small arguments, weary sighs, and the quiet tension of evenings filled with unpaid bills. Ethan, though still young, became a stabilizing presence, offering encouragement, practical solutions, and emotional support. The balance between responsibility and adolescence was delicate, yet he navigated it with growing maturity, understanding that true leadership and moral courage required empathy, patience, and the capacity to act under pressure without losing sight of principle. Thomas, observing these developments, provided subtle guidance. He emphasized that the weight of choices often revealed character, and that the consequences of action or inaction extended far beyond immediate perception. Through one-on-one discussions, Thomas helped Ethan reflect on decisions already made, analyze potential outcomes, and anticipate the moral implications of future choices. The mentorship was both grounding and empowering. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility, but also the assurance that thoughtful action, guided by principle, could transform challenges into opportunities for growth and impact. One particularly tense moment arose during a school ethics debate. The topic centered on resource allocation in disadvantaged communities, a subject directly relevant to Ethan's volunteer work and experiences with Thomas. Classmates proposed solutions rooted in expedience rather than equity, favoring efficiency over compassion. Ethan, guided by his own moral compass, argued for balanced approaches that prioritized dignity, fairness, and sustainability. The debate was heated, and peer pressure tempted him toward compromise, yet he maintained his position, articulating a vision shaped by lived experience, mentorship, and reflection. The moment underscored a profound truth: the weight of choices was not simply external but internal, revealing the depth of one's values and the courage required to uphold them. Meanwhile, outside school, his commitment to mentoring younger students intensified. He faced moments of ethical ambiguity, such as balancing encouragement with constructive criticism, navigating conflicts between students, and making decisions about fair allocation of resources in volunteer projects. Each scenario reinforced the understanding that responsibility was a dynamic, ongoing process, one that required constant evaluation, empathy, and moral courage. Ethan discovered that the weight of choices was not a burden to be avoided, but a responsibility that could shape character, influence others, and create lasting impact. The culmination of these pressures came during a community fundraiser for a local shelter. Logistics faltered, volunteers disagreed, and last-minute challenges threatened the success of the event. Ethan, guided by experience and mentorship, stepped forward to coordinate solutions, mediate disputes, and ensure that the event fulfilled its purpose. By the end of the day, despite setbacks, the fundraiser was a success. The tangible outcome, meals distributed, families supported, children smiling, illustrated the profound connection between careful choices, moral courage, and meaningful impact. Late that evening, as Ethan reflected on the day, he realized that the weight of choices was inseparable from the responsibilities he had embraced. Every decision, from small daily acts to major ethical dilemmas, carried significance. The ripple effects extended beyond himself to family, friends, peers, and even the wider community. Through reflection, mentorship, and lived experience, Ethan understood that the weight of choices was not a burden but an opportunity, a chance to cultivate integrity, empathy, and courage, and to shape the world in subtle but lasting ways. Winter was fading, replaced by the gentle promise of spring, and with it came a sense of reflection and culmination in Ethan's life. Years of mentorship, challenges, and personal growth had shaped him into a young man who understood the profound impact of compassion, integrity, and resilience. But the ultimate test, the moment that would bring the lessons full circle, arrived unexpectedly, reminding Ethan that life had a way of connecting past actions with present consequences. It began with a routine visit to the local community center, a space that had become central to Ethan's growth and sense of purpose. The center was buzzing with activity, children participating in after-school programs, volunteers coordinating donation drives, and staff working tirelessly to manage logistics. Among the familiar faces, a woman approached Ethan, her expression a mix of gratitude and urgency. She introduced herself as Claire, a philanthropist and longtime supporter of local outreach programs. She had heard of Ethan's contributions and his mentorship of younger students and was eager to involve him in a new initiative aimed at supporting families in crisis. The conversation with Claire stirred something profound in Ethan. Her words, warm and admiring, highlighted the ripple effects of his kindness and dedication. She described how a single act of generosity years ago, the way he had helped a struggling classmate, contributed to charity drives, and supported those in need, had inspired her involvement in local philanthropy. Ethan realized, in that moment, that the impact of his actions extended far beyond immediate outcomes. They had created a chain reaction, influencing people he had never met and lives he had only glimpsed through small acts of service. At the same time, Thomas Thompson, who had been observing Ethan's journey from the beginning, revealed a long-held secret. The man whom Ethan had once shared a simple act of kindness with, the boy who had offered him lunch during a moment of need, had never forgotten the gesture. That small, selfless act had stayed with Thomas through the years, shaping his understanding of generosity, human connection, and the power of empathy. Now, as a successful adult, he saw Ethan thriving, embodying the very values that had been inspired by their first encounter. The full circle became even more poignant as Ethan met the family Thomas had quietly helped over the years. They shared stories of how Thomas's intervention, inspired by Ethan's initial kindness, had altered their path, providing stability, resources, and hope during a critical period. For Ethan, witnessing this tangible impact was deeply emotional. He understood, with clarity, that one small act of generosity could reverberate across time and space, influencing decisions, opportunities, and the course of multiple lives. In addition to these revelations, Ethan faced the personal reflection of his own growth. He compared his younger self, the timid, uncertain boy navigating hardship, with the young man he had become. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable now appeared as stepping stones. Family struggles, academic pressures, and the moral dilemmas of adolescence had collectively forged resilience, wisdom, and empathy. Every decision, every act of integrity, had contributed to a cumulative understanding of what it meant to live a life of purpose and moral clarity. The turning point of recognition came during a local award ceremony hosted by Claire and the community center. Ethan was invited to speak about his journey, the mentorship of Thomas, and the impact of community engagement. Standing before an audience of peers, volunteers, and community leaders, Ethan recounted stories of kindness, challenges, and perseverance. His words resonated not only because of his experiences but because of the authenticity and moral grounding that had guided his actions. He emphasized that the greatest rewards were not accolades or recognition, but the positive changes one could effect in the lives of others. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas approached Ethan, his expression a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "You see, Ethan," he said softly, "life has a way of connecting the dots. That small act of kindness you offered years ago created a ripple that touched not only me but countless others. And now, you're continuing the cycle, full circle." Ethan felt a surge of emotion, understanding in a visceral way the meaning of cause, consequence, and the enduring power of human connection. Even beyond public recognition, the full circle manifested in private moments of reflection. At home, Ethan shared his experiences with his family, expressing gratitude for their support and acknowledging the lessons instilled by hardship and love. He spoke with Lily about responsibility, compassion, and the ways in which small actions could create lasting change. His parents, witnessing their son's growth and understanding, felt both pride and humility, recognizing that their guidance and the values they imparted had borne fruit in ways that transcended their immediate vision. By the end of the spring, Ethan grasped the essence of full circle moments. They were not merely coincidences or moments of fate, but the natural outcome of consistent moral action, empathy, and human connection. The journey that began with a simple act of sharing lunch had expanded into a life dedicated to kindness, mentorship, and meaningful engagement with the world. The narrative of his life, shaped by adversity and nurtured by guidance, had come to embody the principles that he had internalized and now exemplified for others. Ethan's story was a testament to the enduring power of compassion, demonstrating that even the smallest gestures could resonate far beyond immediate perception. The full circle revealed the beauty of human interconnectedness, the way acts of generosity, guided by integrity and empathy, could create ripples through time, transforming lives and inspiring others to carry the same light forward. Spring had fully blossomed, and the suburban streets glowed with vibrant color, mirroring the sense of renewal in Ethan's life. Years of hardship, mentorship, and personal growth had culminated in a profound understanding of empathy, responsibility, and moral courage. Yet the story of his journey was not just about his own transformation, it was about the legacy of guidance, the power of mentorship, and the ways in which one life could influence countless others. In this final chapter, the narrative reached its emotional and moral apex, demonstrating that acts of kindness and guidance could shape the guardians of tomorrow. The full impact of Ethan's journey became evident during a large-scale community event organized by Thomas and the local foundation. Families, children, and volunteers gathered in a bustling community park, the air filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of food prepared for those in need. The event was designed to celebrate resilience, community engagement, and the transformative power of generosity. Ethan, now recognized not only as a volunteer but as a mentor in his own right, was at the center of it all, coordinating activities, welcoming participants, and ensuring that every individual felt valued. Among the attendees was Liam, the boy Ethan had mentored months prior. Now more confident, articulate, and engaged, Liam approached Ethan with a bright smile, eager to contribute to the event's success. The sight was a powerful reminder of the ripple effect of mentorship. The guidance Ethan had received from Thomas was now being passed forward, a living testament to the cyclical nature of compassion and leadership. Ethan realized that guardianship was not limited to protection or oversight but included fostering growth, resilience, and the ability to make positive choices independently. During the event, Ethan took a quiet moment to observe the scene. Children ran with joy, volunteers coordinated seamlessly, and families expressed heartfelt gratitude. In that instant, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the struggles of his own family, the scholarship and mentorship opportunities, the moments of moral decision-making, and the unexpected bonds that had shaped his understanding of responsibility. Each experience had contributed to a broader vision, a vision in which guidance, empathy, and integrity were the tools by which one could shape the future. Thomas approached Ethan, his expression a mixture of pride and reflection. "You've become more than a mentee," he said softly. "You're a guide, a role model. You've learned that leadership isn't about authority, it's about empathy, action, and the courage to do what's right. That's what makes someone a guardian of tomorrow." Ethan nodded, recognizing the weight of the statement. Guardianship, he understood, was not merely a title but a responsibility, one that required vigilance, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the welfare of others. Throughout the day, Ethan encountered families who had been touched by his efforts, directly or indirectly. A mother expressed gratitude for the mentorship her son had received, noting that he had begun volunteering and demonstrating initiative at school. Another child shared a story of personal growth inspired by a small act of kindness Ethan had performed during a school project. Each interaction reinforced the profound truth that acts of guidance and empathy could reverberate far beyond immediate perception, shaping values, character, and the moral fabric of the community. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the park, Ethan reflected on the lessons that had defined his journey. He understood that the path from small acts of generosity to significant, life-altering guidance was neither linear nor predictable. Challenges, mistakes, and uncertainty had all been part of the process, shaping his ability to respond with compassion, courage, and moral clarity. Guardianship, he realized, was cultivated through consistent action, reflection, and the willingness to invest in others without expectation of reward. The narrative of Ethan's life came full circle during a quiet moment at the event. He watched Liam assisting younger children, guiding them patiently and celebrating their accomplishments. The sight evoked memories of his own childhood, the moment he had shared his lunch with Thomas, a gesture that had set in motion a chain of mentorship, growth, and transformation. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude and understanding, that the power to shape the future rested not in grand gestures, but in consistent acts of guidance, empathy, and moral courage, passed from one life to another. Even in private moments after the event, the lessons resonated. At home, Ethan shared stories with his family, recounting the experiences of the day and reflecting on the journey that had led him here. His parents, observing his maturity, resilience, and moral insight, felt both pride and reassurance, recognizing that the values they had instilled had been strengthened and amplified through mentorship and experience. Lily, too, absorbed the narrative, understanding the importance of empathy, courage, and the role each individual could play in shaping a positive future. The essence of being a guardian, Ethan realized, extended beyond immediate intervention or protection. It involved nurturing the potential in others, fostering moral courage, and creating opportunities for growth, just as Thomas had done for him. By modeling integrity, compassion, and consistent action, he could influence lives far beyond his immediate sphere, leaving an enduring legacy rooted in empathy and ethical responsibility. As evening settled over the community park, Ethan stood among families, volunteers, and children, feeling the quiet strength of interconnected lives. The journey that began with a simple act of sharing a lunch had evolved into a lifetime of mentorship, guidance, and moral leadership. Guardians of tomorrow, he understood, were shaped not by privilege or circumstance, but by the choices made, the empathy extended, and the courage exercised along the way. And in that understanding, Ethan embraced his role, ready to carry the lessons forward, illuminating paths, fostering growth, and inspiring the next generation to do the same.